welcome. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to get to Hollyhock before, Hollyhock is a lifelong learning center located on the traditional territories of the Klahoose, the Klahaman, and the Homolko First Nations. And we offer programs in wisdom and wellness, creativity, movement, and liberation. And so we're so happy to have you all here with us today. I am coming to you today from the traditional territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First People, and this land is unceded. And so the land that I'm on is now known as Vancouver. And what it means to be unceded is that it's stolen land. Stolen land. And so as we go through this journey of wayfinding in turbulent seas, and as we see the world feeling more turbulent by the second, as we come to terms with the racism that we're swimming in, I invite you to consider that and think about the traditional land that you're coming from. Feel free to write in the chat. I'm always curious to see where folks are coming from. You can write what the land is called today. If you know the traditional territory, please do share that. Love seeing that. We are meeting today on Zoom, and I am your Zoom master. If you're having any technical challenges, feel free to send me a message in the chat. And I'll do my very best to help you out. Great seeing folks coming from Surrey, some other folks coming from Loveland, from Colorado, and from unceded Tongva land in LA. That's great. I didn't know the traditional territory there. And so we're here today for what we're calling HOCKSHOPs. And these are offerings that are free or by donation that are ways to help you stay grounded and connected during this very unpredictable time we're calling, a friend of mine is calling the COVIDian era. The COVIDian era. And so without further ado, I'd love to pass it over to our presenters today, Dan Hines and Keahi Ewa. Dan Hines is a leadership and workshop facilitator. He's also an Anglican priest, and this is his 4th year presenting with Hollyhock. And I'm also really excited to introduce to you Keahi Ewa. Keahi, is this your first, will this be your first year presenting with Hollyhock?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, amazing. And so Keahi is Minister of Emissaries of Divine Light, a workshop facilitator, and Director of Operations at the Sunrise Ranch Conference Retreat Center in Loveland, Colorado. And so I will pass it to Keahi. Take it away.
Thank you, Laurel. Welcome all. Aloha. I'd like to welcome you into an opening chant. We'll put the words in the chat, but try to feel the welcoming, the request for wisdom from above, that we're open, we're ready, willing to be vessels and instruments of that wisdom, ever present in all things. E o mai ka hike mai luna mai ina mea una no e a o na mili e o mai e o mai e o mai ka hike mai luna mai ina mea huna no e a o na meli e o mai e o mai e o mai ka hike mai luna mai ina mea huna no e a o na meli e o mai e o mai e o mai e. Mahalo. Thank you. The Hawaiian Chant is primarily meant to clear the space, to bring in alignment all that is with all that is. My name is Keahi Ewa. Mahalo, Laurel, for the beautiful welcome and introduction. I want to share my journey to meeting this beautiful man that I'm co-facilitating with, that I call a dear friend now, Dan Hines. As Laurel introduced, I'm part of a ministry that's international ministry that has sister communities around the world, and I get the privilege and honor to travel to these communities. And last year, I got to travel to South Africa, and from South Africa, I went to Hollyhock. It took 3 days. It was a long journey, but I got there. And I got there a day early from this conference, and Dan and his wife, Robin, were there. And I was so tired, boy. I was sitting, I had this beautiful meal, Hollyhock sitting on the deck. If you've been there, you know, please. It's a beautiful experience. And I remember them telling me when I checked in, I can go to this public event, Dan Hines speaking and wayfinding, or I can't remember exactly what, or, and I was looking at this fork in the road, and the left was the place where he was teaching, he's speaking, and to the right of the fork in the road was my cabin. I'm like, what should I do? 3 days of travel, nonstop travel. It was, well, stop it anyways. But something behind me was pushing, something inside of me was pulling me. And so I'm like, okay, you know, you ever get that feeling of you got to do this or you're going to miss out on something? So I went, and I'm like, okay, what is this guy talking about? I don't know. I'm so tired. So I sat down on one of those folding metal chairs, very little cushion. I remember because I was so tired and sitting on chairs all day, for 3 hours. And as soon as I saw him, I felt the connection. And then he started speaking. He started speaking of the Hawaiian culture in a way that touches my heart even now. Honoring those that taught him what he's learned thus far in a way that's true to the culture. And now I'm just like, I'm so glad I came. So the more I just opened up, obviously, to him, the more I opened up, the more I felt my ancestors saying, this is what we're pulling you to. This is what we're pushing you to meet this man and his wife and join on his journey. Because our journeys are intertwined. And so it was a big epiphany for me. Yes, Zoe was there. I was literally shaking. And I had to go speak to him. And I shared how I was on a search for how to bring my gifts, my lineage, my expression of my lineage today in a new way that I was told by my elders. I used to paddle for Makaha Canoe Club in Waianae on Oahu, and I was a steersman. And I got really close with a lot of kahus and elders in the community, and a lot of them said, you know, you are a bridge. You need to be the bridge and share our story in a way that's so unique to you that only you can talk to those that you're being the bridge to. I was born in Las Vegas and raised between Hawaii and Las Vegas, so and raised between both, half and half almost. So very confused child, but I can speak both languages in a sense. And so I was like, what does that mean? They're like, I don't know, you have to figure that out. I'm like, okay. And I felt like when I met Dan and Robin, that circle came full circle. So there's a lot. I dove into the Hawaiian culture as best I could. And I went pretty deep, researching my lineage all the way to Tahiti. If you don't know, the LDS, Church of Latter-day Saints, has a great library for that. And took Hawaiian Olelo chant, Hawaiian Olelo language, Oli chant, hula, obviously. I've been dancing hula since I was a keiki in Las Vegas, even, by Hawaiians that taught me. And paddling, ukulele, which I'll share with you later. And it came to a point where my elders were like, stop, because I kept asking questions, going down that rabbit hole into the past. Lemuria. I got to Lemuria. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, or Mu, the land of Mu. And finally, my elders were like, stop going back there. The future is not there. Your gifts, the bridge that you're supposed to be is not there. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm trying to find it. What am I, how am I, you know? They were like, well, you have to figure that out. I'm like, great, thanks. Okay, big help. No. But that is the wisest thing I think you could tell somebody is find your path, find your truth, find your medicine. I can only be a guide. I can only be a support. And I'm so honored to be doing this. I feel all those people that have nudged me on my way. Some with a little harder nudge than others, and I so appreciate it. So now we're on this ongoing learning together. Dan and I and Robin, we went to Big Island in February. My favorite island, Hawaii Island. And learned a lot more and made connections and connected deeper together. So I'm just so appreciative of that. This is our first official collaboration together, and just thankful for all of you that showed up. Thank you for being present, Zoe, and all. So that's a little of my story. I hand it over to Dan.
Thank you, Keahi. And it's been such a grace and such a gift. Thanks to everyone too for coming and being part of this really brief connection tonight. And I wish we were doing it in person. Keahi and I were supposed to be there together last week at Hollyhock, and then with this whole shift in the year and all of us adjusting to a pretty big storm system that came in, really at first undetected. And I was living and working in China up till December as well. So I've been kind of on this journey, not just with my family and friends here in Canada, and as Keahi mentioned, just this chance to go back to the Hawaiian Islands for a brief visit, but also with my friends back in China. So I just wanted to mention that tonight, that I've been thinking about them quite a bit lately. I want to name some people before we begin, because I'm very aware of appropriating the culture of another, and the need to be clear about how we tell stories that are shared with us, we're invited into, but then but don't even begin to claim to own those stories, or have any kind of permission without being very clear about how we're telling the stories and honoring the stories. So I want to name Kaimana, who Keahi and I got a chance, and Robin on the Big Island just recently. Wonderful navigator, now really a grandfather of the movement, and who came up through and was taught by people like Nainoa Thompson and Chad, his mentor. I want to name Bonnie, who's an incredible younger navigator who runs a voyaging academy on Oahu, and takes young people out on these 30-foot catamarans. Incredible story of what she's doing. And Linda, who is also part of the academy and joined us for the day. Some of these stories happened several years ago, and some are more recent, and some have been Zoom calls like this. But I also want to name Walter, a wonderful elder who I got to spend some time with, and a cat from Tonga, and just someone I heard from today, just before this call. It was out of the blue. We've been corresponding back and forth, but Vid he grew up in Sarawal, which is a small island in the Caroline Islands, and he's a nephew of Mau Pialog, who's a famous, very, very famous navigator who came to Hawaii in the 70s and who mentored Nainoa Thompson and others. And I got a chance to connect with his family and his uncle Thomas and Mau's daughter as well. And yeah, it just was a real gift. All sorts of doors have opened up for me. So what I'm going to do tonight is I want to tell you just a brief story of my own connection and my own understanding at this point, how this has been growing and deepening and developing for me in the work that I do in the world. And then also just walk through one practice among many different practices that come out of the ancient tradition. And so and I also want to honor one other elder who's on this call, which is my friend John, who I saw briefly flash up on the screen. I can't see him now, but I know John's on this call. And John has this beautiful 50-foot Beneteau sailboat, keeps in Ladner. And we were sailing together 7 years ago now in the Southern Gulf Islands. And on that trip, I really became aware of how dependent I had become on the navigation system when I was piloting and when I was in that kind of seat of guiding the boat. And it triggered a memory of hearing Wade Davis, who I know is a deep friend of Hollyhock and was just on a recent fundraising conversation with the center. And Wade is an anthropologist, ethnobotanist, ethnographer who lives up in the Sacred Headwaters. Wade, I heard a lecture with Wade and he talked about Polynesian wayfinding. It was the first time I'd heard anything about it. And the rest of that trip and then every other chance I've had to be on the water, I've been aware of my connection to what I'm seeing and experiencing in a way that I hadn't before, with this, I think, a bit of a barrier because of some conceptualization, some perceptions that I had of what I was doing. Here's what we know, and we don't know everything, but not even close to it, but here's what we know. And this has been a post-colonial deconstruction of so much of centuries of misunderstanding, some of it intentional, some of it unintentional. We know now that a group of people left the island of Taiwan. They left this island 100 generations ago, and they did something remarkable. They sailed out into the open ocean without maps, without charts, without a magnetic compass. They went against prevailing currents and winds. And after generations of teaching each other how to sail, they ended up covering millions of kilometers, 25 million kilometers or more actually, of open ocean, mostly water. They did it all in a remarkably short period of time. They found every inhabitable island. They found islands that were 40 days sailing apart. They sailed against all sorts of different conditions, north, south, across the equator, through 2 different hemispheres of currents and trade winds. It's the largest culture sphere on the planet by far. It's larger than China and Russia combined in size. It's one of the most remarkable human stories we have. So I share that with you, not just with permission, but with the blessing of those who've told me that story. And that story has just been very recently understood, although it's there in the tradition. It's there, it's always been known, but it was hidden behind a whole other story that we needed to move past. I'm glad to live in a time in which we can do that together and teach each other the real stories. How did they do it? They did it through oral tradition and chants. So Keahi, you're singing to begin these songs that were sung on the open ocean. This is how all of this incredible skill was passed on and presence. they did it mostly by just paying attention and teaching one another how to be so alert and so sensitive and so clear and how to interpret every piece of data, millions and millions of pieces of data, and how to take it all in an embodied, living presence, and to simply know then where they were with no landmarks in a shifting, moving, fluid environment. I think there's some reason why the wayfinding story now has become even more important. It's because in a time of pandemic, in a time where we're opening up on a greater awareness around racial injustice and all the different social injustices that intersect that, and it's oceanic, you know. There's a strong sense in all of us that we're off the map, and not just individually, but socially, institutionally. We are trying to not just work with the old set of maps we've inherited that told us where we were, but we're developing a new skill together to pay attention, to be open, to learn from each other, to tell stories, and to sense our environment in our bodies with the full array of what we've been given. I want to briefly just talk to you about one skill, and I could talk about, you know, there's so much else going on, but I'm simplifying it just for the brevity of this brief talk today. The primary skill, as it's been relayed to me, and as I've read lots and lots of the more technical literature that's out there right now around traditional navigation, it's not. It is all of the sort of visual field, but primarily it's just embodied knowing through what we would call wave piloting, or what we could call interpreting the surface of the ocean. There are three dominant wave patterns, three different types of waves that are very important in navigating. And in the traditional navigation, you had to be able to differentiate between these three. The first we'll call swells. This is the deep matrix of the ocean. These are created by trade winds. They're created by typhoons and hurricanes. I mean, huge, incredible forces over long distances. And it's not even a wave, it's more a rise and a fall of the ocean itself. And the spacing of these, the frequency, the strength of them. And a traditional wayfinder would know 4, 6, 8 more of these at any given time. And what happens is the catamaran would begin to pitch and yaw and move in a certain way, in a kind of a dance and a rhythm pattern, and that would be embodied over time. That was held with a vision of the island. And this part is hard to understand from those of us who've been socialized with maps and definitely with Google and GPS. But they didn't work with a projection. They didn't work with a bird's eye perspective. They didn't lift themselves off of the deck of the boat. They were connected to the ocean, to what they were sensing. And they didn't create an artificial two-dimensional flat world to put themselves on. And they didn't rely on satellites that were linking up to their location and giving them data on a screen. They were just noticing what the boat felt like, and whether it felt as though it was on course, whether it felt like the island was coming. And they also, because they weren't working with projections, and they weren't working with a bird's eye perspective, and they weren't working with a linear concept of travel, of movement through space, they also navigated with The boat was actually stationary, and the islands were moving around, and the island they had left was fading away and disappearing behind the curvature of the earth. But there was a connection. There was a felt bond with that location, especially if it was home, because you needed to know in case you need to turn around at any moment where home was. And then you also need to know wherever you're going, you need to know how to get back. And this is true in the desert. This is true in the Arctic. This is true everywhere. And this is true for every animal as well, not just humans. So these swell patterns. Now, that would be really wonderful if that's all the ocean was just big swells, and you could just feel your way and know where you were going and sense your direction. But storms would circulate around, big storm cells, and they are moving. They have no navigational information, but they tell you a lot about what's going on in the immediate surroundings, and they tell you what you need to do. Maybe you might want to pull a sail in. You might want to take a run for it. You might want to just prepare and see if you've got enough water and food on board, because this is going to be a big one. So you have to be able to tell the chaotic storm energy and not get confused by it, not lose the deeper pattern. And then I'll end with this before I turn it back to Keahi. There was also over the distances a really different type of wave, the third type of waves. We could call these bounce waves, but when water hits a solid object like an island or a coastline, it sends off refraction and reflection waves. These bounce waves come off, these disruption waves, and they're different. And you would just notice a slap on the side of the hull that was out of the ordinary. And it would tell you that there was an island where you could not see. And we know now that the ancient wayfinders were so sensitive and so aware that they found all the islands whenever they got into a certain proximity through these bounce waves. Hundreds of kilometers away now, far further than bird activity or the color of the sky. They were noticing these deviations in the wave pattern. I'm always looking for metaphors of the heart, metaphors of the soul, some way to describe the human experience to others and to invite them into their own inner landscape or their inner seascape. And I found this has been so helpful because it tells me that so much of my spiritual practice, so much of the things that I'm trying to do in my life is to stay aware of this deep pattern, this rhythmic embodiments that tells me where I am, where I'm going, what I'm envisioning, what I'm manifesting. But I'm also have to live with the reality of these storms, and I have to be able to differentiate them and deal with the panic and the fear they create. And I'm also, I'm tantalized by these small bounce waves because they indicate the future that is coming to the present. It's already appearing in the present, but it's a question. Do I reference off that or do I turn towards that? Is that an invitation or is that just a reassurance? And what's my hunch and inkling? Okay. So someone's asking about the waves. So I call one swells, I call one storm waves, and I call the last bounce waves. Those are my names for them. They have much more technical names than that. I hope that's helpful. Okay. Now I think we're going to create an opportunity for us to get into our own experience with the ocean, and Keahi's going to guide us in that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Dan. I've experienced being in a canoe. I've experienced being in a catamaran and different boats. You feel these different waves and that. So we're gonna try to explore what that means internally and how we can be in the world throughout these different waves. I'm going to read a poem. It's Judy's poem. Then we're going to break out into groups of 3. if you are not ready or now's not your time to be in a great breakout, just decline the invitation to go into a breakout room. No worries. All are welcome here. And sometimes I don't want to get in a breakout room either. So it's all good. Dan and I will be going into breakout rooms. So ours are going to be the best. No, I'm joking. No. These are really deep spiritual principles in the Hawaiian culture. And it's also nice to have joy and lightness in it too. So let's share in this together.
I'm wondering if I'm missing a cue. Are we starting with the poem or going straight into breakouts?
Poem.
Poem, all right.
Sorry. Yes. So breathe this in. If you'd like to close your eyes, it's welcome. It's Judy's poem called The Trough. There is a trough in waves, a low spot, where horizon disappears, and only sky and water are your company. And there we lose our way unless we rest, knowing the wave will bring us to its crest again. There we may drown if we let fear hold us within its grip and shake us side to side and leave us flailing, torn, disoriented. But if we rest there in the trough, are silent, being with the low part of the wave, keeping our energy and noticing the shape of things, the flow, then time alone will bring us to another place where we can see horizon, see the land again, regain our sense of where we are and where we need to swim. Judy Brown. So we're going to put some questions in the chat. Just going to review them. The questions are, for those that are wanting to go into a breakout room of 3, where do I feel I am on the wave? Where do I feel I am on the wave? The crest, the trough, descending into a trough, or ascending up a crest? What do I need in the trough? Where do I need to swim? There are no right or wrong answers. You don't need to answer all the questions, but exploring these within yourself and sharing what you feel comfortable sharing with those you're in your room with. Those are the questions on the PowerPoint. I think we're wanting to put them in the chat as well, because when we go into breakout rooms, it will show up for us there. And for those that don't go into a breakout room, just explore these questions within yourself on your own. Ready for the breakout rooms.
Thank you for taking part and for sharing. So I think we're all here. And so Dan, I will pass it back over to you.
Hey, okay. Yeah, and I hope that was a service to you, to be able to hear yourself speak into that that smaller community and get a bit more airtime. Just want to mention the program that we've got coming up, because this HOCKSHOP, this workshop with Keahi and I was intended to mostly just give you a sense of who we are and what we're offering from just a heart and from sense of our own being and what we provide as I would say, the bread of our being, which is really what we offer one another with presence. We are going to be also offering an experience together that's going to be guided by a lineage of teaching in small group work that some call a circle of trust. I want to name Parker Palmer, who is my mentor, and that work together that Keahi and I want to share with you. It's guided by, I think, a beautiful intention, which is that it's far more helpful for us to access our own inner wisdom and to hear each other into deeper speech by holding a practice of solitude and community. And we want to do that with, minimizing some of the ways in which the storm waves operate in groups by being very respectful, very disciplined, having some boundaries. And at the same time, just bring this wonderful, fun, joyful, zany kind of energy that Keahi and I are discovering with each other. And we're just going to be true to that too, as part of the journey, and not have it too heavy all the time and too introspective. And just bring a lightness to the voyage as well. So on your screen, you can see sort of the way the times work. We're doing a couple of evenings and a couple of midday kind of offerings there mixed together, or morning offerings, sorry, 9 to noon on the Saturday, Sunday, and then in the Thursday, Friday evening. So that's kind of what we've put together. I know Hollyhock also has, very generous when it comes to the possibility of scholarships. And if you need to write in, and maybe Laurel's going to do all this stuff. I'm not sure what she's going to do, but in the closing minutes here that we have together. We'd like it to be an opportunity, to really pay attention to how each of us are navigating life at this moment. And what is it that's really showing up, and what is it that we're really feeling and sensing and knowing? And then to just exchange some stories with each other, because it's a lonely journey a lot of the time. And so to kind of pull up all of our catamarans on the same beach for a few days, and to light a fire and to tell some stories and maybe hear some chant and song, and just be together in a time of great disruption and great uncertainty. We're going to mix in some poetry, we're going to mix in some visual images, mix in some walk and talks that we're going to try. We're just going to experiment, and we're going to kind of, I think, push Zoom to its limits as well, because this is an embodied work, and so we're not together in person. So we're going to try as hard as we can. And you'll have also some good opportunities for solitudes, for sort of deep check-in, because I think the real gift of being in community is when we are deeply present to ourselves, and then we're bringing that into the community, and therefore we're not so self-conscious, so aware of the group, and so deeply enmeshed in interpersonal connection that we can't do that sort of transformative individual work. But at the same time, we need each other. We need the encouragement to being together. We need to hang out. And so we're going to do it with what we got available right now, which is online on Zoom. And I have had the good experience the last few months of facilitating a lot of great circles experiences on Zoom. And I've been pleasantly surprised how well it's gone and how good it has been to be together, even though I would so love to just be in the room with all of you. Actually, what I'd love to do is I'd love to be out in the water with you all. In a big, giant sailboat, and all of us hanging out together and telling some stories together. And maybe that can happen someday. I hope it can happen for you too. Okay. So that's what I want to offer right now as we're transitioning. I think we're still doing okay time-wise, but I want to make sure that I leave some time here because I know Keahi is going to do what I think is we talk about wayfinding. I think it's really easy to get focused on sort of technical navigational skills and lose the presence of ancestors, and those are mostly encountered through music and prayer and memory. So yeah, we're all on the same catamaran now. It feels like it. So I want to invite my sister Keahi, who is going to now share with us and kind of close out this. And I think there's some bit of hollyhock as well going to, Laurel's going to share a little bit too. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you all for being present and participating. This is my ukulele, my electric ukulele. It has a faux hole because it's electric, but it's really cute. This song I wrote, the lyrics, I felt as if I was on a deep journey in the middle of the ocean when I wrote it, but I was on land in a house with walls in the ceiling. And I hope these words touch your heart and inspire, or just you can relate to them maybe. Oh, I'm supposed to turn on original sound. Okay, try this. Is that better? Double thumbs up. I hear the call upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. Newness of the cycle pressing forth and now. Abundance surrounds. A new day comes into frame. Inspiration flowing like the waves. We are here to express love and endless grace. For I am yours, you are mine. Abounds in deepest waters, connection clear, spirit here, open to the promise waiting to be birthed here and now. A new day comes into frame. Inspiration flowing like the waves. We are here to express love and endless grace. For I am yours, you are mine. Journey moving without question. Bring your gifts, all will shift. Trust the process, live freely, 'cause love is all that's needed here. A new day comes into frame. Inspiration flowing like the waves. We are here to express love and endless grace, for I am yours, you are mine. Wow.
Thank you, Keahi. Speaking personally, it's such a gift to work with Dan and Keahi. I think we had our first meeting in April, and it just felt like taking a breath of fresh air. You know, these people who remind you to breathe. I need those people. This is them. Thank you for sharing these gifts and these words with us. And really do encourage folks to consider joining that next sailing, to join that catamaran that'll be taking off on July 16th. Again, if you have questions about scholarship opportunities, you can send me a message in the chat, or you can email us at info@hollyhock.ca. We'd love for you to set sail with us on that adventure.